This is Tell Your Story, Alaska. We talk aviation, history, theology, but most of all, the raw stories of Alaskans and the gospel. Hey everyone, I am here with my friend Brad Sturm. We are in McGrath, Alaska, which is a village in the interior. And you told me earlier, what's the population of McGrath?
We're plus or minus 300 people.
About 300. And it used to be a lot larger than that, didn't it?
Yeah, back in the heyday, the smaller estimates are around 700 upwards to 1,000 or more.
Yeah.
Back in the day.
When we were flying in here the other day, we were noticing how nice the airport is. It's paved,
yeah.
It's long, it's lighted. And I was saying, for a village of 300, this seems too nice. Yeah. So obviously it had been bigger.
It had been way bigger, yeah.
Yeah.
FAA was here, and at one time there was an Air Force base, which is why the airstrip is over a mile long.
Oh, okay. It was an Air Force base. Yeah. Okay, cool. And so first of all, we're here at the place called One Wilderness Lodge, which is a ministry of McGrath Community Church here in McGrath. And we're actually attending right now a marriage conference. And the marriage conference is for believers who are in surrounding communities. And my wife and I are here, and we flew in a few people. And I wanted to sit down with you and learn more about what you do here in the village of McGrath and more of your story.
Yeah.
So, but first I need to talk about the weirdness of our stories and how they're like exactly the same.
It is pretty weird. That's how you and I actually met.
It is how we met. Like, someone wrote an article about you and I read it, or maybe it was a newsletter. And it was like, this is this family that lives in McGrath. They are from Chicago. They went to Moody Bible Institute. Then they served in Mexico, and now they're in Alaska. Yeah. And I read that, and I think they're talking about me because I'm from Chicago. I went to Moody Bible Institute. I served in Mexico, and now I'm in Alaska. So I wrote you, and you wrote back, and we ended up meeting at Costco in Anchorage. And
that's skipping a couple steps. You sent me this message on Facebook.
I did?
Saying just that, hey, I heard about you, and our paths are, our journeys are so similar. I just thought I had to reach out and say, hey, and we talked on Facebook Messenger for just a little while. And then a mutual friend, Nate Sobey, contacted me later and said, hey, Brad, you got all these flying needs out there, aviation needs for these gatherings. I met a guy you need to meet. He might be a really cool resource for you. And that's when I reached out to you. And it wasn't until after that I realized you were the guy that had sent me that Facebook
and you
messenger.
made that connection after.
Then I made that connection afterwards.
I think actually Nate Sobey showed up randomly at Costco while we were there meeting.
And that's how you guys met?
No, we had met before that, but he was just randomly there. Anyway, the whole... Yeah. Was he randomly there? Or is he with you?
It was random.
He was random.
He just happened to be there when you and I were meeting at Costco. Yeah.
So you and I have a lot of strange random connections.
Yes, that's funny.
But strangely, we were both at the same college at the same time, and we didn't really know each other, except that you were married at the time and I was not.
Yeah, which makes a big difference.
You were the alien married people that were...
we were the weirdos.
Live
off of campus, yeah.
Okay, so let's go into... I just want to go through who you are. So tell us where you're from, what growing up was like. Let's start there.
Yeah. I'd say kind of just a pretty typical Christian family, which I am super thankful for. I grew up just outside of Chicago. My dad was a firefighter. My mom was a secretary. Grew up in a wonderful Christian church called Medina Baptist Church. Had a great upbringing. Knew the gospel from very young. Was pretty active in youth group. And it was right around junior high when I began to realize that my faith was not my own. And that's kind of the period in my life, maybe 7th or 8th grade, where I kind of pinpoint that period of my life as the time where I gave my life to Christ for real and realized that I wasn't going to get to heaven by the faith of my parents. And so I, through the testimony of a couple friends in school and the influence of a teacher there, a gym teacher, Ken Paris, I was challenged to make my faith my own, and that's what happened then.
Can you tell? What do you mean by make my faith my own? What do you mean by that?
I knew all of the answers. My dad was a deacon in the church. If the church doors were open, we were there, and you couldn't ask a Bible question for the most. I mean, that's a bit of an exaggeration, but the idea is I knew the answers. I knew the pat answers to questions, and like I said, I was super involved and active. But if I want to be super honest, I was kind of just a hypocrite. I could say all the things and act the right way when I was at youth group, and then I could turn around and be a completely different person who couldn't care less about any of those things actually affecting my life. For example, is Christ really your Savior? Do you really love this Lord, and do you act that way? Because if you do, you will know them by their fruit. And there was no fruit in my life. Is nothing lasting, nothing real.
It's kind of like you knew exactly how to fit perfectly into the Christian community, 100%. Be accepted and loved and part of that community, but
no doubt about it.
In your heart, it was not genuine.
There was
yet.
nothing there. I couldn't imagine not getting to heaven when my dad was going to go to heaven. My sister was going to go to heaven. My mom was going to. My grandfather's a Southern Baptist preacher. My other grandparents love the Lord with all their heart. My extended family are believers. I mean, of course I'm a believer. I'm a Sturm.
And you realize you couldn't ride into heaven in their coattails.
That is what happened. I was challenged by this man, my gym teacher, basically called me in and said, "Hey, I hate to be so strong with you, but I think you're a hypocrite. I don't think you really, really believe this stuff." And it shocked me. It woke me up, and I kind of had to be. It was my come to Jesus moment where I was like, you know what? He is right. And so that happened right around that time, and my life began to dramatically change, which was pretty cool. I decided to go to a Christian school, so I went to Wheaton Academy, which was fantastic for me. And it was there on a missions trip that I got to meet Denny Norris and Ted Clark, missionaries in Central Mexico. Wow. I was 14, going on 15. I went and spent time with them. I actually spent 2 months with them in Central Mexico in the state of Michoacan. And two things happened there. One, they challenged me to take the next step, which was, you might love the Lord now, but are you living for Him? Are you living for eternity? Or are you taking Him into consideration as you plan and think about your life and your future? And I was not. So that woke me up to, I wanted to do some crazy military type stuff, and the Lord didn't even enter my thinking.
That's an interesting distinction. Say, I love Jesus, but I want to do these career moves that don't really involve my love for Him. That's exactly and so now you're blending the two, your ambitions in life with your relationship with Christ.
There you go. So Lord just kind of brings strategically the right men into my life at the right time to help me take these next steps. My pastor giving me this wonderful doctrine and gospel truth, and this gym teacher saying, "Hey, it's not real to you. You need to take this seriously."
And you're a hypocrite.
You're a hypocrite. And then this missionary coming along and saying, "Hey, it's cool you have this relationship with Him, but how is it affecting your life? And time to live for Him." And that was wonderful. And I'm super thankful for those guys. So the second thing he did was open my eyes to missions and the whole idea of serving the Lord in that capacity, planting churches, making disciples around the world. And so I pretty much just said to the Lord, I will do that if that's what you want me to do. And I started basically listening to those missionaries. Whatever they wanted me to do, I listened to them. And one of those was go to Moody Bible Institute. And before I was able to make it to Moody Bible Institute, I met my wife. And we had kind of an interesting dynamic where we began kind of getting romantically involved. And I say this as just a matter of fact, not because looking back on it, I think it was the right thing or the way to do it.
Okay.
But she was really interested. My wife was really interested in missions. She had been to Ecuador with the Waodani tribe, and Steve Saint had flown her in there, and she had met those people there in Ecuador. Her heart was sold on Hispanic missions work, and so was mine. So we were just knit together. Really, got engaged in high school and then married just out of high school.
Well, I did not know that about you. Interesting.
Yeah. So that's kind of unique, but it was wonderful and the right thing, I think, for us.
Sure.
And then we went to Moody Bible Institute and crossed paths with you, even though I don't totally remember it.
You do look a little familiar.
And I don't know if I'm making it up, if I'm telling myself that you look familiar too, or if you really do look familiar.
You know, I was once in a movie produced by the Moody Media Department. I mean, it's not famous by any means, and don't watch it ever. But they did show it on campus.
Okay. It's not the one where someone jumps off of a roof.
No.
Okay, that's okay. Yeah, no, the Moody days are a blur.
We were just talking earlier. We can't remember like the names of buildings, and it was really it was a blur. We're just getting old, and that's a weird experience.
There you go.
So, what did you study at Moody?
Systematic theology.
Okay. Oh, you were telling me earlier that by the time you graduated, there's only you and a few other students, and now that program's gone.
I am almost certain that program is gone. Yeah, I think it ended shortly after I graduated. I could be mistaken.
Okay. And what did your wife study?
She studied elementary education.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And her plan was to become a teacher then?
Yeah, she did become a teacher and has used it homeschooling our kids for many years. We have 7 kids now, and so she's used that homeschooling the kids, but then in several different situations before we left for the mission field and once getting here to McGrath, she was able to use that professionally. And kind of the Lord, we think, used that as a way to establish us in this community and kind of gain us some rapport and stuff like that, which was really fun.
Yeah, okay. So tell us what happened. I really would, since I went to Moody, I want to hear more about Moody, but let's go forward to like what happened next after Moody.
Yeah.
I know you ended up in Mexico.
Yep.
But how did you go from Chicago to Mexico?
Yeah, Chicago was a stepping stone to Mexico, so we kind of knew Mexico was the next step. Those missionaries had invited us down, and were waiting for us to go down and basically learn missions under them.
Oh, so did you have Mexico on your radar?
Yeah.
Like through Moody?
Yeah,
it was like, okay. That's nice to have that kind of clarity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so that's exactly what we did. I served as a youth pastor for just a little while during and then after Moody. My wife taught, and then after the birth of our first child, our church sent us to Central Mexico.
Wow.
Actually, we went to Costa Rica for almost a year, and then Central Mexico.
And Costa Rica is for learning Spanish?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep, that's right. And Mexico, I can pretty much summarize pretty quickly. We took about a year and a half to learn what we were doing, get our feet underneath us, underneath kind of the tutelage of the Norrises and the Clarks, these Christian Missions in Many Lands missionaries, CMML, that's who we're with.
Oh.
And then we moved to San Miguel de Allende, just a little bit north in the state of Guanajuato, and did a church plant there, just outside of that city.
Wow.
Yep, and we did that until we had leadership established, and we're planning on moving on, and that would be kind of the next chapter of our life of how that moving on ended up with us here in McGrath.
Yeah. Could you tell the story? You told a story earlier about you were offered a position with the federal government.
Yeah.
And then you ended up turning it down. Could you tell that story?
Yeah.
That's an interesting one.
Yeah, the kind of the truncated version was a friend of mine didn't want to apply for this federal police officer position, which I'll be honest here, like I like saying federal police officer position, which is completely true, but it sounds way more tough and masculine and than water reclamation police officer, which is what it actually was. And so he asked me if I'd go and apply for this job with him because he didn't want to do it alone, so I did. 3 years later, after a whole bunch of stuff that happened as far as like the next step, and then never hearing anything from them. Fast forward 3 years, we are getting ready to move to Mexico. Our church has basically commended us. I have a little girl now. We literally get a letter in the mail saying that I have been hired.
Wow.
By the city, by the Department of Water Reclamation as a police officer. Great job, amazing benefits, good pay, all this stuff, and I was floored.
Was that at all on your radar at the time?
Not in the slightest. Okay. In fact, we lived in Chicago. I was attending Moody when I applied for that job, and my landlord calls me and says, "You got a letter in the mail that looks important. Can I open it and read it to you?" I said, "Yeah, please do." And so she She reads me this letter and says, "You just got accepted to this police officer position." So I had to kind of go through another physical test just to make sure I hadn't gotten fat or lazy. And
Did you?
I hadn't. No, I passed. Okay. No, wasn't fat, wasn't lazy. And I accepted the job. I was a couple months out from going to police academy in Springfield, Illinois. And that began.
I'm just curious. Was there, because you were about ready to leave for like the mission field?
Yeah, that's where we were headed.
And then you just shifted gears. Say, I'm taking this police academy training. What was going through your mind? Was there any like, I'm not a good Christian, or like what was happening? With that?
100%. That was going through my mind. My spirit was totally not at rest. I was kind of doing everything I felt like I needed to make sure I was making a wise decision, talking to church leadership and my dad and my grandfather and any man who I respected and I knew loved the Lord, my wife, of course, talking to everyone. And the general advice uniformly across the board was, take this job. This seems like a really good opportunity. I don't think the Lord would be tempting you with something like this. Yeah, you should do this. Push pause on missions and do this for a little while.
Wow. Oh, you got a dog here.
Got a dog.
Yeah, your dog's barking a little bit.
Yeah, and that began nights of sleeplessness. Axel, you're okay.
I think a truck drove by the dog's got his guard dog senses.
Good job. Good boy. Keeping us safe. Yeah. And there was one person I had not told, and that was Denny, the missionary in Mexico. I kind of in my heart knew what he was going to say. And
you were afraid to ask him.
Yeah, because there was a real big part of me that wanted to go take this police officer position, and I felt like I had all the justification.
And he was probably going to tell you not to take it.
Yeah, in my heart, I knew that's what he was going to tell me.
I can relate to that. That makes sense. So, did you talk to him?
I did. Yeah, it finally got unbearable. I called him up. His wife answered the phone. He was at another building where his office was located, and I asked to talk to Denny. As Arlene, his wife, said, call back in 10 minutes. And so during those 10 minutes, I sat in my office at Medina Church and just prayed. I asked the Lord point blank, please have Denny tell me what I'm supposed to do. I don't want advice. I don't want counsel. I don't want, good I don't want him telling me he's going to pray for me. I want him to tell me.
Some vague answer,
yes,
like follow the Lord and stuff like that. Yeah.
I wanted to know. I can't make this
I feel like
decision.
that's the desire of every young man.
Yes.
I mean, I went through that, like, what do you want me to do? I'll just do it. Just tell me what it is.
Yeah.
And we all go through that process.
And I think I'll be honest with you, I think by and large, that's God's plan.
Mm-hmm.
I think,
the struggle.
Yes, I think that's why he doesn't. That's why we have this thing called wisdom and this thing seeking out counsel, not seeking out answers.
Right.
That's how we grow and walk with the Lord and make decisions. But in this specific one, I think the Lord was merciful and gracious and said, "Okay, I'll give you a pass. I'll give you an answer on this one," which is what happened.
Yes. Well, Noah got blueprints. Moses got a clear go there. It's not always his MO to be vague or uncertain.
Praise the Lord. Sometimes he knows.
And here's a case where maybe you had a burning bush sort of thing.
That very well could be. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Either way, I am thankful that the Lord put on Denny's heart to give me. I called back 10 minutes later. Denny answered, and I explained the situation. And he just simply said, Brad, you cannot take that job. If you take that job, I don't think you'll ever make it to the mission field. And I think he was right. In retrospect, tacking on another 20-something years of experience and wisdom and sanctification, I think he was right. I don't think I would be sitting here talking to you if I hadn't made that call. So I hung up with him, picked the phone right up, called the recruiter and told that person that I was backing out. And, that was the
which he probably was not expecting.
No.
Yeah.
No. So that was a really cool.
And I want to hear before we move on to talk about the lodge. Just because I went through the same thing, what was it like having to learn Spanish in a foreign language while living there with a wife, with a child? Was it humiliating? I mean, that's a word I use sometimes, learning the language, just feeling dumb all the time. What was that process like for you, learning another language?
Yeah. No, I think I was pretty roll with the punch kind of guy.
You still seem like that kind of guy.
Yeah, I think I'm okay. I think I'm okay with kind of being humiliated. There's no doubt about it. You just can't take yourself seriously. And the more you cannot take yourself seriously, quite frankly, the better and quicker you're going to learn a language, because you're just going to jump in and do it. And people are going to laugh at you, and you're going to laugh at yourself, and they're going to laugh at you laughing at yourself, and then they're going to want to help you make it better because you're friends. And
well, I really covet the younger version of you who was like that. I was not. So when I got laughed at from my language mistakes, I didn't take it very well. Way to go.
Yeah.
Cool.
So praise the Lord. That was, I have many, oh my goodness, many weaknesses. You need another podcast to talk about my weaknesses, but that wasn't necessarily one that I struggled with. So I enjoyed learning.
You enjoyed it. Okay.
Spanish, yeah.
And then while you were down there were some church plants that you worked on. And were those wrecked with lots of challenges, or did that go pretty smooth?
So, we did the language training in Costa Rica, and then moved after that to central Mexico, where I worked for about a year and a half in a huge city called Morelia. Okay. And worked there with Denny at a church that he had already planted. They were planting another church, and so I kind of just did whatever Denny told me to. I was his shadow, just stuck to him. He helped me learn Spanish even better and helped me prepare messages and things like that.
It sounds like he was almost like a fatherly figure that you really admired, and kind of that's really great for a younger guy to have.
Yep. Now in retrospect, I kind of want that even for my son, for my boys. I want them to be able to go and experience that, hear what they hear from their dad from someone else. Yes. They would really respect.
To reaffirm it's not just my kooky dad, it's other men.
It means something different, and there's a part of me that hates that idea. No, you should just learn it from me. I want to be that guy for you. But the reality is, the Lord uses other people in his family.
It pokes at our pride as fathers a little bit, Well, your dog has got that protective vibe going.
You're all right.
Okay, so let's talk about the transition, Mexico to Alaska, because I had the same transition, and I have a story, and there's actually an episode about that, an earlier one about my story. But how on earth, central Mexico to in the interior of Alaska? Let's go into that.
We were getting ready to wrap up our church plant. There was leadership named, and we were thinking about where to go next, and kind of the perfect storm. We were looking for different places, and this was not a concern of mine, but just something that we were taking into consideration. And this is an absolute, praise the Lord, wonderful fact. And that is that there are a lot of missionaries in Mexico. There are a lot of wonderful churches in Mexico, and we were finding it difficult to find where to go next. And which we absolutely would have found where to go next, because there are places to go next. But it wasn't the simplest thing, as far as I was struggling with how many people were there already doing that work, and was wondering if there wasn't a place maybe with a larger vacuum where there were fewer people willing to go, maybe fewer people already serving, and if my wife and myself and our family were willing to go to a place like that, if it wouldn't be, just humanly speaking, a better allocation of resources.
Sure. I know what you're saying.
I don't
understand.
know how biblical that is. I don't know if that's the right way to think, but it was going through my mind. John Piper wrote a book. He's written a couple books on missions. One called "Let the Nations Be Glad," which is fantastic. Yeah. But he wrote a follow-up to that called "Finish the Mission," and I was reading that at the time. And it's kind of a call to not just do missions, but to seek out those really dark places where the gospel isn't. Yeah. And so long story short, our hearts just started turning towards the north, and quite frankly, just because I like the cold. And I had a friend that did a lot of ministry up in Russia and the former Soviet Union, those areas. And through some godly men in our lives, including Denny and Ted, those missionaries, the door seemed to open for us to begin really, really pursuing going to Russia.
Wow.
And so I spent some time traveling in Russia, throughout the country of Mongolia, Ukraine, those areas. And for a variety of reasons, we've really kind of starting to feel drawn to the Republic of Buryatia in Siberia, to work with the Buryat people right around Ulan-Ude. And so we spent some time there, and long story short, it was going to take a long time for us to be able to get there, so we decided to go back to our commending church, our home church, which is in Baltimore, and we ended up spending about 2 years there while we were planning and thinking about how to get to Siberia. However, I wanted to keep my feet wet, and I wanted to keep my family's feet wet in missions, and a friend of mine simply said, hey, the people you're going to be working with over there have a lot of cultural and even historic and genetic overlap with some of the Western tribes in Alaska. Inupiaq people, Yupik people, and stuff like that. Yeah. And I thought, well, you don't need a visa to go there. I'm going to start looking for short-term missions opportunities just to kind of expose myself to those things here while I'm waiting for the door to open for us to be able to move to Siberia. Well, that was a mistake, because we crossed paths with someone in McGrath at a missions conference in Alaska in 2017 who said, Brad, if you're looking for a place that could use some help, looking for a place that has need for people, you need to come and see what's happening in the interior of Alaska, and specifically in McGrath. Wow. And so with that invitation, I did investigate just what was happening in McGrath, and I don't know how much detail you want me to get into in that.
Yeah, well, what was happening in McGrath? What were the elements that drew you in?
So there was a wonderful church that had kind of a topsy-turvy history with leadership, wonderful leadership that I don't have anything bad to say about, though I have to say I don't know them. Okay. Never met really any of the leadership, but leadership that for a variety of reasons wouldn't stay for very long. And so it was a church, a gathering of believers who was longing for some leadership. And more than just leadership, permanent leadership, longevity, leadership that would stay. And
would you say, this is sort of a generalized question for Alaska, would you say that's a very common issue? Okay.
Yeah, no doubt about it at all. And I think there's a whole lot, a myriad of reasons standing behind why that's a true statement. Given the kind of the magnitude of reasons and the weight of those individual reasons, that's not slights on the people who come and then decide that it's not for their family or they can't stay long term. It's not a slight on those people. It's just kind of a reality of missions in the interior of Alaska. That happens a lot. It's kind of the name of the game.
When I first arrived in Alaska, when I started learning about the cultural of missions here, if you will, that's one of the things I've heard pretty consistently is the high turnover rate, or if you go into a village, they kind of are expecting you to leave pretty soon.
Yeah, definitely. I showed up here. I had a big Connex delivered with all my stuff. Week one, a lady, and I don't even remember who it was, but a lady walked up to me and I was all excited because I was getting to meet a neighbor, and she said, Hi, are you owner of this Connex? Did you just move here? I said, yes, I did. Yes, ma'am, I just moved here. She said, well, in the spring when your family leaves, could I have that Connex?
That is funny. She was investing.
Yeah. So that is definitely a warranted concern that interior residents have about people moving here. Are you going to stay?
Oh, that's so interesting. I have hopes for future podcasts to go more deeper into that. Yes, because I think it is it touches on the core of an issue or the challenge. I don't know what word to use, but here in Alaska.
It is a challenge. There's no doubt about it. It is an issue, and that is a challenge that needs to be biblically and strategically thought through.
Yes.
Brainstormed and answered. Yeah, for sure. No doubt about it.
Okay, so now you have this lodge. I believe you bought this lodge. When did you buy this lodge?
I think we closed on it January of 21.
Okay, January of 21. So you've had it for a couple of years.
Yeah.
And when you just tell me this, it's One Wilderness Lodge. It's part of McGrath Community Church.
Yeah.
And just tell me about the vision and the desires for what you want to do with this facility.
Definitely. Yeah. So when we decided to change focus and kind of shift our focus from Siberia to McGrath, there were two really big thoughts on my family's mind, and thoughts that we had communicated to the church here that was inviting us to come. And that was, one, we want to be a part of building a healthy church here in McGrath. And so a massive part of, in fact, the lion's share of our ministry is being a part of the leadership team, the shepherding, pastoring team of McGrath Community Church, and building up that team and establishing us as a family here. And then we want to see, and we're asking the Lord corporately, what does that mean now? Now, once we attain that, what is our calling outside of McGrath? Here we are, situated 250 miles from a road, smack dab in the middle of the interior of Alaska, in this little village.
It is far out here.
Yeah,
we flew here, and it was like a lot of nothing, and then McGrath.
McGrath, yep. And we're this hub village right in the middle. Like, just picture a map of Alaska, put a pin in the middle of it, and you're pretty close to my house, And what does it mean for us, situated out here, to reach our neighbors, to be a resource of edification and encouragement for our neighbors? Because some of the statistics and these numbers are loose, but they're pretty close. They're in the ballpark. There are over 200 villages that are interior villages, and some 80% of those are still in need of established churches, evangelical Protestant churches. And so what does it look like for us to be a part of the expansion of the kingdom of God, the discipling, the evangelism, the church planting of this region? And one theme came up over and over and over and over and over again, and it was the ability for us to be hospitable to people, us to invite neighbors. We couldn't just drive over and have coffee with people. If we're going to literally have coffee with people, a plane was involved. Someone was traveling somewhere, and it was going to be a pretty big endeavor. And the ability to host was needed. And I mean, I don't have a Hilton, or a Red Roof Inn or whatever right up the road. We couldn't do that. So people sleeping in cots and in garages and in our church and stuff like that. We began praying that the Lord would provide us with a place to be able to be hospitable, to host people, and then through that venue be able to build relationships and bridges with people around us. And that was the birth of kind of getting this lodge.
And it sounds like your heart and vision for this place to be very relationally based.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's just like the native culture must be
better.
relationally based.
100%. There is relationship. It's why we don't actually even, and not to correct you, Billy, but we don't have conferences here. We call them gatherings. An idea,
I used the wrong word.
Yeah, that's totally fine, and I'm not offended very much. No, conference in my mind, in our minds, conference was come sit down and listen. Gathering is get together and talk, share your heart, learn, meet new people, and that is the heartbeat of these gatherings.
Well, it's certainly happened so far in this gathering. I've had a lot of great heart-to-hearts with some folks. I want to record episodes with all of them here because I've already heard several stories. The truth is I just don't have time. I'm leaving in a couple days. But anyway, sorry, keep going.
So we just kind of threw it out to the Lord, asked the Lord to bless it. It's an amazing story of how we were able to get this lodge. And it was, long story short, this lodge had been burned out really bad.
I remember seeing the damage one time when we came.
It was horrifically damaged in a fire and pretty much left to its own for a little over 10 years.
Wow.
So we were able to get it for a killer price. And then churches and organizations, families, individual families sacrificed a massive amount of time and energy and resources to help us build it. It's still actually in the building process.
In fact, I just met one guy, Tim. He's downstairs right now, and he came to help with the construction, and he ended up moving here
that's
permanently.
One of those examples.
That's
of
such
a family
a neat
that wanted
story.
to come and help, and they just ended up staying.
They just stayed.
So it's really been a corporate body of Christ endeavor, seeing this lodge get put back together. And now it's put back together. It's my home, which is a recent thing. And it is, first and foremost, this gathering place. We have a hotel attached to it with 7 rooms. We've got a coffee shop. Someday we'll have a restaurant, Lord willing. And we have a huge gathering area. About a 2,000 square foot lobby with tables and fireplaces and
a
couches
grand piano.
and a grand piano.
My wife was just playing it downstairs a little bit ago. It was lovely.
And then we built and fostered relationships with people like you, with Soaring for Christ, Pioneer, you guys, with MARC, Missionary Aviation Repair Center. Send North is intimately involved with what we're doing out here. Even Interact and Arctic Barnabas and these other organizations that have a heart for the interior, have an aviation component to their ministry. They have bent over backwards and also sacrificed time and resources and pilots and all that stuff for us to be able to go around and start bringing anyone who wants to gather together for these short, truncated, free, intimate relationship building times where we seek to edify and encourage each other. And that has kind of been our answer to what does it look like for McGrath Community Church to reach out around here. The idea has been, we're not sure. We don't have the answers. We don't know. But we need to build relationships. We need to build bridges with who are our neighbors, our brothers and sisters that are around here. And quite frankly, there is a really big dynamic to when you fall in love with the Lord and you're following Christ, but you live in a place where you're kind of isolated and alone, and there isn't a big church around you, or maybe any church around you. That is hard. Quite frankly, we were not created to live that way.
Right.
And it's very difficult. And so we need to go to extreme lengths to bridge not just the kind of the emotional and cultural gaps and spanses here, but like geographic spanses and bridge those. And we have to do that with planes and gathering, and that's kind of what we did this.
I can't tell you how many missionaries I've connected with, and I can't tell their stories on a platform like this just because they're depressing. Not because they're depressing, but they're too personal for a platform like 100%. This. Missionaries that are just so isolated and they're so discouraged. Why am I here? Why am I like nothing's happening? Things like it just seems like a common theme across Alaska. And even the last few years, there's been in-house conflict among missionaries and organizations. It's just been really like the enemy has just wreaked havoc. And so, being here at this, not conference, but a gathering.
There you
go. There are people here from multiple organizations, and we're just laughing, telling jokes, sharing. We were literally just playing Rook, the fun card game down there. There's
singing
some board
together.
games, singing hymns together. So your mission is being accomplished right now, even this weekend as I'm here with you, and and that's been great. So tell me. I remember you saying you do you're aiming to do 6 conferences a year.
Kind of
tell me how you do the scheduling, the timing, and why you do it that way.
Sure.
Tell me about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of some of the little facets of the gatherings are we want them to be truncated, we want them to be interior located, and we want them to be inexpensive, and the reason is so that more people can come. It's really difficult for someone especially in the interior, to travel to the road system, and then be able to, especially in the road system, be able to kind of unwind.
Can you explain road system for the non-Alaskans?
There you go. Road system. So Alaska can kind of be divided into 2 really big kind of regions. One is the road system, which is everywhere in Alaska you can access in a car. That's the road system, which amounts to about only 10% of the kind of geographic location of Alaska. And then there is the off-the-road system, bush, interior regions or coastal regions of Alaska.
McGrath is way off the road system.
It's way off the road system, in the interior. Yep. So So definitely for people in the interior to travel to the road system and do conferences, which is where a lot of conferences and these gatherings happen traditionally, is a pretty big intrusion into someone's life. A lot of times a welcomed intrusion, like a wonderful thing. Like intrusion might actually not be the right word. It's not a bad thing, but it is a pretty big sacrifice.
It's a whole trip that you have to pack and plan and all the big stuff.
You got to push pause on your life in the interior, which can be pretty difficult depending on when it is and stuff. So we wanted a time where people didn't have to sacrifice a whole lot of time, a whole lot of money, or a whole lot of energy getting to the road system, which we thought would remove major obstacles to the vast majority of people being able to come. And then we wanted to do it frequently so that, first off, we're tiny little McGrath, so we can't host big gatherings.
Right.
And second off, there's a lot of people that want to come here, so our answer seems to be, let's do them frequently. So you can't come to this one. Well, I got another one in a month and a half.
And that even keeps them smaller and more intimate that way. It's not like there's a million people there and it's just a crowd. Yeah,
that's exactly right.
Yeah.
And then in those, we wanted to focus on, our heart has been to focus on 3 big groups. You're experiencing the first ever marriage gathering, which is one of those 3. The other 2 is focusing on families, where we just bring family units together. The other one is church leadership, any type of church leadership, professional, like kind of full-time church leadership, potential church leadership, struggling church leadership, church leaders that are rock stars and have all their ducks in a row, everyone coming together and just encouraging each other, and marriages. Those are our 3 big gatherings. Kind of our goal is to be able to do 2 of each of those every year.
Wow. So 2, 2, and 2. So that's 6 gatherings.
That's our 6, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, very cool. And you were saying too, you kind of aim for the winter months.
That's right. Yeah.
Because summer months, there's all these other activities going on. And you don't want to step on those.
And I don't want to step on the other people's toes.
It is bonkers. I don't know if I could come here in the summer.
You would definitely know that. All the flying you do for those things. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, cool, Brad. I love the vision. I love being here. I'm thankful. Thank you for asking me to fly for it. We came up here.
First of many.
The weather, when we were planning it, the weather wasn't great. Then the day of, it was just like.
And that has happened.
It has been the best flying weather. We came up through Rainy Pass, and it was just as clear as can be. If someone wanted to check out One Wilderness Lodge. Or donate to it or anything like that, or contact you, say, hey, I'd like to come to one of those, how would they do that?
Definitely. Yeah, we've got a website called onewilderness.org. And there's our history, our passion, who we are, information about all of us, the leadership, the church that has dreamed this up, future events, past events, and how to be involved, how to pray for us, how to come and be a part of those gatherings, how to support them financially if that's what you wanted to do. Yep.
And you even have a cool video.
We've got a really cool video that I think you guys make an appearance in.
I think so. Yeah.
Yep.
All right, Brad. Well, hey, I'm hoping to fly for some more.
Yeah.
I was going to say conferences, gatherings again. And thank you for taking time to share about it. And I hope some people check out onewildernesslodge.org. Thank you, Brad.
Really. You got it, man. I love it.